Welcome back, learners. You will recall that in section we learn about communism, socialism, fascism, feudalism as forms of government. In this study section, that is study section 8, we'll be focusing attention on parliamentary and the presidential systems of. At the end of the session, you should be able to define what is meant by the parliamentary system of government and explain its characteristics. 2. To discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the parliamentary system of government. 3. You should be able to define the presidential system of government and explain its major characteristics. Discuss the advantages and the disadvantages of the presidential system of the parliamentary system of government, meaning and character. The parliamentary system of government is also known as the bicephalous executive system, and it is defined in terms of the relationship between the office of the head of state and head of government. In this system of government, different persons occupy these offices, and there is no strict separation of powers between the legislature and the executive. Under the parliamentary system of government, the monarch, the governor, or the governor general is usually the head of state, while the prime minister is the head. The role of the head of state is more or less ceremonial, while the executive powers are vested in the cabinet of most countries. Features of the parliamentary system of government. 1. Bicephalous executive system. There is the head of state who performs ceremonial function and the head of government who performs real. 2. There is fusions of powers. There is fusion of powers. Members of the executive are appointed from. 3. Collective responsibility. All cabinet members are collectively responsible or accountable for all decisions of the cabinet. A minister who is not in support of any decision is required to resign. There is an opposition. The advantages of the parliamentary system of government. Number 1, it is cheap because members of the executive are usually appointed from the legislature. So the cost of governance not all that high. The legislature can dismiss the executive. This prevents the prime minister from becoming a dictator. 3. Collective responsibility enables members of the cabinet to work as a team, bearing in mind that the shortcoming of one ministry or department may affect the other ministries and departments. 4. The process of policy making is fast, bearing in mind that the bills coming from the executive are introduced by the same people who are in the. 5. It reduces legislative stroke executive conflicts that hold sway in the presidential. It promotes good governance because the prime minister and members of the cabinet operate cautiously, knowing that the legislature can easily dismiss them through a vote of no. In spite of these advantages, the parliamentary system of government has some. 1. It promotes mediocrity in governance. The prime minister is not elected by the entire nation, but by one constituency. Collective responsibility does not allow for the apportion of blames in governance. Ministers that are performing are made to suffer for the shortcomings of other ministers. 3. Collective responsibility does not allow for the blunders of a minister. 4. Lack of fixed tenure of office may not allow for proper planning and stability. 5. The prime minister is allowed to appoint members of his cabinet, that is the minister, from the legislature. This does not allow the Prime Minister to tap from the wealth of experience of citizens who are not members of the legislature. The fusion of power may breed dictatorial tendency. The Prime Minister may become dictatorial by virtue of the enormous powers vested in him. Then another disadvantage is that there is a tendency of political instability arising from the frequent change. Britain is a good example of a country that is adopting or practicing the parliamentary system of government. Nigeria, in the First Republic, that is between 1996 and 1966, adopted the parliamentary. Now let's move to the presidential system of government. The presidential system of government can be defined as a system of government in which all executive powers of government are vested in one person called the president. And there is the separation of powers among the organs of government. We also have a semi-presidential system associated with the French. And in this system, the president is popularly elected and has constitutional authority. The president exists alongside with a prime minister who has the cabinet and is responsible to the legislature. In this study session, our emphasis is on the presidential system and not on the semi-presidential system. As noted earlier, the presidential system of government operates on the principle of separation of powers. The Constitution gives to each branch of government some monitoring role in the actions of the others. In the Nigerian context, the National Assembly enact laws, but the president can veto them. The Supreme Court can declare unconstitutional laws passed by the National Assembly and signed by the president. The president appoints the judges with the approval of the United States of America. Operates the presidential. Nigeria in the Second Republic, that is between 1979 and 1983, practiced in the aborted Third Republic. At the state level, the presidential system of government was also adopted. And since the birth of the Fourth Republic in 1999, Nigeria has been adopting or practicing. What are the characteristics of the presidential system? One, it has a monocephalous executive system. That is to say, the offices of the head of state and head of government are combined. The same person performs. Two, there is separation of power among the organs of government, the executive and the judiciary. They are separated. Members of the executive cannot or are not expected to be members of the. There are checks and balances. The president is elected for a fixed tenure of office in Nigeria and in the US. Ministers appointed by the president are individually responsible. The president can reshuffle his cabinet at any time and appoint new ministers if those appointed, if they have not been. There is provision for the impeachment to remove the advantages of the presidential system. One, separation of power. The organs of government are separated, and this guards against dictatorial tendencies. Two, the principles of checks and balances prevent any of the organs of government from becoming too powerful. And three, the president enjoys a fixed tenure of office. This promotes. Four, there is no conflict between the head of state and head of. Five, the entire nation or country elects the president. Consequently, the president may not be dancing to the whims and caprices of a particular constituency, and of course, there is no collective responsibility. Hence, each minister is accountable and responsible to the president. Performing ministers are not made to suffer for the shortcomings of other. Despite these advantages, the presidential system is also having some shortcomings. So let's talk about one. Too much of powers are concentrated in the office of the president. This may make the president. Two, separation of powers means that members of the legislature are not members of the executive. This may increase the cost of. Three, separation of powers breeds conflict between the executive and the legislature, particularly if different political parties control both organs of government. Four, the absence of the formal structure of opposition may make the president to be ruling according to his whims and caprices. And five, the president may abuse the enormous power vested in him. He may dismiss ministers